Please, mister. I need to eat. I'm starving. Can I please have some bread?
There is a boy standing outside a glass tower in the heart of Chicago, and he is asking a stranger in an expensive suit for whatever is left in a paper bag. He is 9 years old. His jacket is 2 sizes too small, and the soles of his shoes have started to separate from the leather. He has learned, the way children learn hunger before they learn shame, that men who wear suits like this one sometimes have more lunch than they can finish. He does not know the man's name. He does not know that this man, standing over him in the afternoon light, was once married to his mother. He does not know that this man held him the day he was born and promised, out loud, in a hospital room 9 years ago, that he would never let him go hungry a single day of his life. That promise was broken the night this boy's father disappeared, and for 8 years, everyone who loved him believed he was dead. Today, on an ordinary sidewalk, on an ordinary lunch hour, that promise is about to be tested again, and neither the man nor the boy has any idea. By the end of this story, you will understand exactly how a father can stand 3 feet from his own son and not recognize him, and how a boy can hold out his hand to a stranger and be looking, without knowing it, into the eyes of his father. This is the story of Nathaniel Reeves, and the son he never stopped losing. Chicago in late autumn is a city of glass and wind, of towers that catch the last gold light of the afternoon and throw it back down onto sidewalks, crowded with people who never look up. Somewhere in one of those towers, a man known to the world as a self-made success walks out for lunch every day at the same hour, unaware that the ordinary rhythm of his life is about to break open. Somewhere else in that same city, a woman has spent 8 years raising a son, alone, telling herself that grief eventually softens, even when it never quite does. Their 2 worlds have not touched in nearly a decade. Today, without either of them choosing it, they are about to be pulled back into the same orbit, and nothing about the life either of them has built will be able to stay the way it was. Here is what we know for certain, and what we do not. We know that 8 years ago, an executive named Nathaniel Reeves vanished the night before he was set to expose fraud inside his own company. We know his wife, Helena Reeves, was 7 months pregnant when he disappeared, and that she never stopped believing, quietly, against all evidence, that something about his death did not add up. We know that his business partner, a man named Desmond Cole, inherited everything Nathaniel built. What we do not know yet is whether Nathaniel truly died that night at all, or whether the man now walking out of a downtown office tower for his lunch, under a different name, has been alive this entire time. That is the question this story is going to answer, piece by piece, and it will not answer it the way you expect. Before we go further, we want to know something about you. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. There is a reason we are telling you all of this now, before the story has even properly begun. It is because somewhere in the next scene, a 9-year-old boy is going to walk up to a stranger and ask for his leftovers, and that stranger is going to feel something he cannot name. He will not understand it. He will tell himself it is nothing. But something in him will not let it go, and by the time this story is finished, you will understand exactly why. For now, picture Helena Reeves, 38 years old, standing in a small kitchen on the south side of the city, counting out what is left in a jar of coins to see if there is enough for groceries this week. Picture her son, Ezra, walking 2 miles home from school because the bus pass ran out 3 days ago. This is the family that was left behind when Nathaniel Reeves disappeared, and this is the family that is, without anyone in it realizing it yet, about to collide with the truth. 10 years ago, before any of this happened, Nathaniel Reeves was 29 years old and convinced that the life he was building was the only one he would ever need. He had grown up in a small apartment on the west side of Chicago, the son of a mechanic and a school teacher, and he had climbed his way into business school on scholarships and late nights, determined to become the kind of man his father could point to with pride. He met Helena, during his final year of graduate school, at a coffee shop near campus, where she worked nights to pay her own tuition. She was studying to become a nurse. He liked to say, later, that he fell in love with her before he ever learned her last name, because he had watched her calm down a screaming toddler at the next table with nothing but a steady voice and a patient hand. They married 2 years later in a small ceremony behind her mother's house, with folding chairs borrowed from a church and a cake Helena's mother, Ruth Callahan, had baked herself because they could not afford a bakery. Nathaniel had just been hired at a mid-sized investment firm founded by a sharp, ambitious man named Desmond Cole, who saw in Nathaniel a work ethic he could build a company around. Within 3 years, the firm had been renamed Cole and Reeves Holdings, and the two men were being written about in local business journals as the future of Chicago finance. Desmond was the face of the company, magnetic and quick with a headline. Nathaniel was the one who actually built it, the one clients trusted with their money because he never once told them what they wanted to hear instead of the truth. When Helena became pregnant, Nathaniel told everyone at the office he was going to be the kind of father who came home for dinner, no matter how big the deal on his desk was. He meant it. Colleagues would later remember him leaving important meetings early because Helena had a doctor's appointment, something Desmond never quite understood and, if people are honest, never quite forgave. On the night Ezra was born, Nathaniel held his son for the first time in a hospital room on the north side of the city and made him a promise out loud, the way people do when they do not yet know how fragile promises can be. He told his newborn son he would never let him go hungry, never let him feel unwanted, never let him grow up wondering where his father was. It is a promise that would be tested in ways Nathaniel could not have imagined, and broken in ways that were never entirely his fault. But underneath the success, something had already begun to shift inside the walls of Cole and Reeves Holdings. Desmond Cole had built his public image around being the visionary, the risk-taker, the man reporters wanted to interview. Privately, the firm's actual performance depended almost entirely on Nathaniel's caution and his refusal to cut corners. As the company grew, so did the gap between the image Desmond sold to the world and the numbers Nathaniel quietly kept balanced behind the scenes. Colleagues would later describe a change in Desmond during this period, a new impatience, a habit of closing his office door for long stretches of the afternoon. At the time, no one thought much of it. In hindsight, everyone would agree it was the beginning of everything that followed. It began with a single number that did not match. Nathaniel was reviewing quarterly filings on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks before a major shareholder vote that would determine whether Cole and Reeves Holdings would be approved for a significant new round of outside investment. A transfer of funds to an account he did not recognize had been logged under a client name that, when he checked, did not exist in their system. He told himself, at first, that it had to be a clerical error, because the alternative was something he did not want to consider about the man who had built this company alongside him. He spent the next several nights going back through records quietly, alone, after everyone else in the office had gone home, and each night the picture that emerged became harder to explain away as a mistake. What he found, over those weeks, was a pattern of transfers, moving client funds through shell accounts and back into personal holdings controlled by Desmond Cole. It was not a single lapse in judgment. It was a structure, built carefully over years, designed to survive an audit unless someone who understood the company as intimately as Nathaniel did happened to go looking in exactly the right place. He confronted Desmond privately, in his office, after hours, and later described the conversation to Helena as one of the strangest of his life. because Desmond did not deny it. He simply asked Nathaniel, calmly, what it would take to make this go away. Nathaniel told him there was nothing that would make it go away, that he intended to bring the discrepancies to the board before the shareholder vote, and that Desmond had until the end of the week to get ahead of it himself. He left the office that night, believing he had given his partner and friend a chance to fix what he had broken. Helena would later say that Nathaniel came home unusually quiet, that he held Ezra a little longer than usual before bed, and that he told her, almost in passing, that he loved her, in a tone she did not think much of at the time, but has never been able to forget since. The following night, Nathaniel Reeves did not come home. His car was found the next morning abandoned near a stretch of riverbank on the edge of the city, the driver's door open, his phone still inside on the passenger seat, his wallet untouched. There was no body, no note, no witness. Police treated it, at first, as a possible accident, then briefly as a potential abduction, before the case quietly began sliding toward the explanation no one wanted to say out loud, that a man under enormous professional pressure had simply chosen to disappear. Helena refused to accept that explanation from the very first week, and she has never fully accepted it since. But 7 months pregnant and suddenly alone, there was very little she could do except wait for answers that did not come. The investigation into Nathaniel's disappearance lasted, officially, just under 4 months before it was quietly moved to inactive status. Detectives interviewed Desmond Cole twice, both times in the presence of a lawyer, and both times he expressed what appeared to be genuine grief over the disappearance of his friend and business partner. He offered a substantial reward for information. He spoke to reporters about Nathaniel's brilliance, his integrity, how much the company owed him. It was, by every outward measure, the behavior of a man in mourning, and it worked exactly as intended. Within a year, control of Cole and Reeves Holdings had shifted entirely to Desmond, who quietly renamed the firm under new branding and positioned himself as its sole visionary founder. The story of Nathaniel Reeves fading from the company's official history a little more each year. Helena gave birth to Ezra 2 months after his father disappeared, alone, except for her mother, Ruth Callahan, who moved into her small apartment to help however she could. What followed was not a single dramatic collapse, but a slow, grinding erosion of everything the family had built. Legal challenges over Nathaniel's shares in the company dragged on for years, tied up by lawyers Desmond's firm could afford and Helena could not. Savings meant to last a decade were gone within 3 years. Ruth's own health began to decline under the strain of caring for a grieving daughter and a fatherless infant, and eventually the apartment they shared was lost as well, forcing all 3 of them into a smaller, harder version of the life they once had. Ezra grew up knowing almost nothing concrete about his father, only the version of the story that was gentle enough for a child to carry, that his father had gone away before he was born and was never coming back. He grew up watching his mother work double shifts as a home health aide, watching his grandmother's hands grow more unsteady each year, learning early the particular quiet that settles over a household where there is never quite enough. He was not an angry child. He was, if anything, unusually careful, the way children become when they sense, without being told directly, that their family is one bad week away from losing something else. Meanwhile, somewhere in a different part of the city, a man was building an entirely different life, under a different name, and the strangest part of the story is not that he had disappeared, but what he did not remember about why. In the years following the night beside the river, fragments of Nathaniel's old life had begun to feel to him like something that belonged to someone else, distant and unreachable, the way a dream feels an hour after waking. He did not know, not fully, what had happened to him that night, or how he had come to wake up in a hospital 3 states away with injuries he could not explain and memories that arrived only in pieces, if they arrived at all. Present day, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in downtown Chicago, a man known to his employees as Nathan Reed steps out of a glass tower for his lunch hour, the way he does most days when the weather allows it. He built the company that occupies 3 floors of that building from almost nothing, over the better part of 8 years, in a city where he arrived with no memory of who he had been before and no clear explanation for how he had gotten there. He is, by every account that matters to the people who work for him, a decent employer, generous with time off, quick to remember names, careful never to raise his voice. What none of them know, what he himself does not fully know, is that the man they call Nathan Reed was born under a different name, in a different life, to a wife and a son he has spent 8 years unaware even existed. He is halfway through his sandwich, sitting on a low concrete ledge in the plaza outside his building, when a small boy approaches him and asks, quietly, almost apologetically, whether he is going to finish it. The boy is thin in the way that makes grown adults uncomfortable if they let themselves really look, wearing a jacket clearly meant for someone a size smaller, his sneakers held together at the toe with tape. Nathan does not hesitate. He hands the boy the rest of the sandwich, along with the untouched apple beside it, the way he has occasionally done for other people on hard days in this city. It is, on the surface, an unremarkable act of small kindness, the kind that happens on city sidewalks every day and is usually forgotten within the hour. Except this time, it is not forgotten. As the boy thanks him and turns to walk away, Nathan finds himself watching him go for longer than the moment requires, an unfamiliar tightness settling behind his ribs that he cannot immediately place. He tells himself it is nothing, that the city is full of children who need more than anyone is giving them, that his reaction is simply decency doing what decency does. But that night, alone in his apartment, he catches himself thinking about the boy's eyes, a shade of brown he cannot stop turning over in his mind, and he does not understand why a stranger's face would follow him home the way this one has. The boy, for his part, walks the rest of the way home that afternoon, thinking very little of the man in the plaza, beyond simple gratitude, the way a child thinks of any adult who has been kind to him, without asking anything in return. He does not know the man's real name. He does not know that somewhere in a box his mother keeps on the top shelf of her closet, there is a photograph of a man with those exact same eyes, taken on a hospital bed 9 years ago, holding him for the very first time. He walks home, finishes his homework at the kitchen table, and does not think about the man in the tailored suit again that night. His mother, across the city, is thinking of nothing but the rent that is due in 5 days. What began as a single, unremarkable afternoon slowly became something closer to a pattern, though Nathan Reed would have been reluctant, at first, to admit that to anyone. He found himself taking his lunch in the same plaza more often than he used to, telling himself it was simply the weather, or the location, or convenience, reasons that grew thinner each time he examined them honestly. When the boy appeared again, a week later, Nathan learned his name was Ezra, that he was 9 years old, that he lived not far away with his mother and grandmother. He learned these small facts, the way a person learns anything they are not yet ready to admit they are looking for, carefully, without pushing, collecting details the way someone collects pieces of a photograph they cannot yet see the whole of. At the same time, something else had begun happening to Nathan that he understood even less. Fragments of memory, previously locked somewhere he had stopped trying to reach years ago, had started surfacing at random, uneven moments, triggered by nothing he could identify. A smell of rain near a riverbank made his chest tighten without explanation. A woman's laugh on the street once made him turn around so fast he nearly dropped his coffee, certain for half a second that he recognized her, before the stranger's face resolved into someone he had never seen before. His doctors, years earlier, had told him this kind of thing was possible, that severe trauma could bury memory in ways that resurfaced slowly, unevenly, sometimes never fully at all. He had stopped expecting it to happen. Now, it would not stop. Across the city, Helena Reeves had begun hearing a name that made her stomach turn in a way she could not fully explain, even to herself. A rival firm downtown, led by a self-made executive named Nathan Reed, was being written about in the same business journals that had once profiled her husband, and something about the coverage, a photograph in one article in particular, kept catching her attention longer than it should have. She told herself it was grief playing tricks on her, the way it sometimes still did 9 years later, turning strangers on the street into echoes of a face she had spent nearly a decade trying to stop searching for in crowds. She did not let herself say the thought out loud. She was not ready for what it would mean if she was right. Then, one evening, going through an old storage box she had not opened in years, Nathan found a single photograph tucked inside the lining of a coat he did not remember owning, a coat from a life he could not place. It showed a young woman with dark hair and a steady, patient smile, standing outside what looked like a small apartment building, laughing at whoever was holding the camera. He had no memory of her name. He had no memory of the photograph being taken. And yet, something in him, something far beneath the version of himself he had spent 8 years building, recognized her, the way a person recognizes their own handwriting on a page they do not remember writing. It was Ruth Callahan, in the end, who put the pieces together first, in the quiet, unglamorous way that families often stumble onto the truth, not through dramatic discovery, but through a conversation that almost did not happen. She had seen the same business journal photograph Helena had been unable to stop thinking about, and unlike her daughter, she said what she was thinking out loud, at the kitchen table, over a dinner none of them could quite afford. She told Helena, gently but plainly, that the man in that photograph had her husband's eyes, his jaw, the particular way he held his shoulders in every picture she had ever seen of him. Helena told her mother she was imagining things, the way she had told herself the same thing for months. But that night, she could not stop looking at the photograph again and again until morning. What followed was not a single dramatic confrontation, but a careful, frightening unraveling of 9 years of assumptions. Helena hired an investigator, using money she genuinely did not have, to quietly look into the background of the man calling himself Nathan Reed. What came back was strange, in exactly the way she had feared it might be. Medical records from a hospital 3 states away, dated the same week her husband disappeared, for a man admitted with no identification and injuries consistent with a serious accident. A legal name change filed less than a year later. A trail that led, slowly but unmistakably, back to a man now running a company in the same city she had never been able to leave, because leaving would have meant giving up the last thread of hope that Nathaniel might still find his way home. She arranged, through the investigator, a meeting she told herself was simply to confirm what she already suspected, though some part of her must have known it would become something far larger than confirmation. She brought Ezra with her, not because she planned to, but because she could not find anyone to watch him on short notice. And in hindsight, she would say it was the only way this story could have unfolded, the way it was always going to. When Nathan Reed walked into the small conference room the investigator had arranged and saw the boy from the plaza sitting beside a woman whose face he recognized from a photograph he could not explain owning, something in him broke open that had been sealed shut for 8 years. Helena did not need to say anything at first. She simply watched his face, the way it moved through confusion into something closer to recognition, into something that looked, unmistakably, like grief finally finding its way home. When she finally said his name out loud, Nathaniel, not Nathan, his own name spoken by a voice he had not heard in 8 years, something in him that had been holding perfectly still for a very long time finally gave way. He did not remember everything in that moment. He did not need to. He remembered enough, looking at her face and the boys, to understand exactly what he had lost and exactly what, impossibly, had just been given back to him. News of Nathaniel Reeves' return moved through Chicago's business community with the particular speed reserved for stories no one could have predicted, and it reached Desmond Cole within days, exactly as everyone who understood him assumed it eventually would. For 8 years, Desmond had built his entire public identity, and increasingly the financial health of his firm, on the foundation of Nathaniel's absence. He had rewritten the company's history so thoroughly that some of his own newer employees did not know the name Nathaniel Reeves had ever existed. Now that history was standing in a conference room downtown, alive, remembering more with each passing day, and asking questions about a discrepancy in the books that had never actually gone away, only quiet. What followed was not a quiet resolution. Desmond attempted, first, to discredit the growing rumors as opportunistic fiction, suggesting to reporters that a man claiming to be his long-lost partner was either mistaken or deliberately dishonest. When that failed to stop the momentum building around Nathaniel's return, he moved to something colder, using every legal and financial resource still under his control to delay, obstruct, and threaten anyone connected to the reopened case, including the original detectives who had investigated Nathaniel's disappearance 9 years earlier. Helena, who had spent nearly a decade being underestimated by men who assumed grief made a woman easy to dismiss, became one of the sharpest forces working against him, providing the investigators' full findings to a reporter who had spent years quietly suspicious of Cole and Reeves' finances. The confrontation that followed took place not in a courtroom at first, but in a boardroom, in front of the very shareholders Desmond had spent 8 years cultivating, with a story that was never entirely true. Nathaniel stood in front of the same people who had once trusted him with their money, still visibly rebuilding the fluency he had lost, and laid out, methodically, the same financial discrepancies he had discovered 9 years earlier, this time with documentation Desmond had never managed to fully erase. Desmond attempted, once more, to turn the room against him, questioning his memory, his identity, his motives. It did not work. Too many of the numbers matched too precisely, and too many people in that room had spent 8 years quietly wondering about a story that had always been just slightly too convenient. The final vote, when it came, hinged on a single shareholder no one in the room expected to attend, an elderly investor who had known Nathaniel personally in the earliest days of the firm and had never fully trusted the version of events Desmond offered afterward. Her vote, combined with the documentation Nathaniel presented, was enough to tip the board decisively against Desmond Cole, triggering an internal investigation that would, within the year, lead to criminal charges. It was not, in the end, a moment of dramatic triumph, so much as quiet, exhausted relief, the particular kind that comes after 9 years of carrying something too heavy for one family to hold alone. In the months that followed, Nathaniel Reeves did not simply step back into the life he had lost, because that life, in the truest sense, no longer existed to step back into. What existed instead was something new, built carefully out of the wreckage of everything that had happened, shaped by 9 years neither he, nor Helena, nor Ezra would ever get back. There were long stretches of quiet difficulty that no headline about his return ever captured. Therapy sessions meant to help him recover memories that sometimes came and sometimes did not. Careful conversations with a son who had grown up believing his father was gone and now had to learn, slowly, what it meant to have him back. Helena has said, since, that healing looked less like a single reunion and more like years of small, deliberate choices to keep showing up for each other. Ruth Callahan, whose instincts had started this entire unraveling at a kitchen table she could barely afford to keep the lights on above, lived to see her daughter's family whole again. Something she has said, in the rare interviews she has agreed to, she had stopped allowing herself to hope for somewhere around year 6. Desmond Cole's case moved slowly through the courts, the way these cases often do. But the company he built on someone else's absence did not survive the truth once it was finally allowed back into the room. Nathaniel chose, in the end, not to reclaim the firm that bore his name, deciding instead to fold its remaining assets into the smaller company he had built as Nathan Reed, a decision he has said had less to do with business and more to do with wanting nothing left standing that reminded him of the years he lost. Ezra, now a year older than he was, the afternoon he first asked a stranger for the rest of his lunch, no longer walks 2 miles home from school because there is no longer a missing bus pass to account for. He does not remember, and perhaps will never fully understand, exactly how ordinary that first encounter in the plaza felt to him at the time, how close an entire family came to never finding its way back to itself over something as small as a sandwich handed to a hungry child on an unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. What he does understand, now, sitting across the dinner table from his father most evenings, is that the man who once gave him half a sandwich without a second thought is the same man who once promised, in a hospital room 9 years ago, never to let him go hungry a single day of his life. There is something worth sitting with in a story like this one, something beyond the relief of a family finding its way back together, against odds that should have made it impossible. It is the reminder that the smallest, most unremarkable moments of kindness we offer strangers are rarely as small as they feel in the moment we offer them. We want to know what you would have done in Helena's position, spending 9 years refusing to fully let go of a hope everyone around you had quietly stopped sharing. Let us know in the comments, and if this story moved you, stay close, because the next one we are about to tell you is one you will not want to miss. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.